My name is Tanya Miller, and I'm speaking today on my interviewing experience and how said experience connected with both Strengths Quest and the course materials. I will start with a summary of my interview process, who I managed to get interviews with, what I learned just through the process of interviewing, and then I will end the section on my interviewing experience with things I would have done differently. And then I will explain what my themes of strength are, and then I will explain how they tied into my interviewing experience. Finally, I will briefly describe how my course material correlated with my interview experience. First, I will go through explaining what my interviewing experience was, going through my steps, the contacts made, the lessons I learned, what my overall experience was, and finishing up with what I would have done differently. I started off the way I was supposed to. I created a list of 10 businesses or organizations I would like to work at and created the outline of my interview. However, since the outline assignment clearly said that I cannot proceed until I had an explicit statement to do so, I wound up wasting a week waiting for the explicit statement of permission. As soon as I could, I started contacting the businesses and organizations on my list. I didn't limit myself to emails, but also called and always got to the answering machine. I got some calls back, but most of them were to tell me that they're not available for an interview. I eventually got 3 organizations who informed me that they are open to doing an interview: Inland Imaging, PAML, and Washington State University. The contact at Inland Imaging allowed me to make a recording of the interview, and when I brought up the fact that I had to have a recording of the interview when communicating with PAML and WSU, the contact at PAML seemed to be okay with it, and the contact at WSU told me that she would rather I didn't record it, and offered to direct me to someone in Spokane who works for WSU who I could talk to, and I haven't heard back from WSU since. The individual at PAML waited until I was about to start recording the interview to tell me that there were clauses in company policy which prevented me from recording the interview, and as such I chose to continue with the interview but did not record it. I have continued to try to contact more places, but no one has responded, and I have given up hope that I could get 2 more recorded interviews done. The first thing I learned is that many places, if not an overwhelming majority, have clauses in their policy against being recorded, and some people seem to balk at the idea of being recorded. I also received feedback that the type of interview I conducted was something that they had never seen before, but I felt that the interview went rather well regardless. As an individual who have been bullied and harassed most of my life, I was concerned that being a part of a company or organization may be opening myself up to another avenue for attack, but I quickly discovered that my concerns have been unfounded, as these behaviors which I have been the target of in my past have been dealt with in company policies. The final thing I learned is that even if the interview is one that no longer qualifies for credit, proceeding anyways is not a complete lost cause, and I could still learn something new from the experience. As far as my overall experience goes, I feel that my questions may have probed too deeply, and in some cases the answers were not what I was looking for. Due to experience with many places having specific clauses in their policies against having recordings, I found it difficult to proceed at times. I have come across situations where I wanted to add more to the questions in order to ensure that my intentions came across clearly. Upon thinking and processing my experiences interviewing, I find myself thinking of things I would have done differently. Firstly, I would have started contacting companies and organizations weeks in advance and scheduling the interviews to be done once I got permission to continue, rather than waiting on permission to contact companies and organizations. Secondly, I would have phrased my questions differently and in some cases added a sentence or two before the question to explain why I'm asking that question and to explain what kind of information or knowledge I'm looking for. Finally, I would not have allowed myself to become a nervous wreck over things I couldn't change or affect, and instead took some time to step away and get my mind off of it while I still had time to do so, and before things got too overwhelming instead of constantly dwelling on it and working myself up into panic attacks over things outside of my control. Now I will go through the connections I have found between my interviewing experience and Strengths Quest. My results from the Strengths Quest test said that my signature themes are analytical, futuristic, input, intellection, and restorative. Analytical means that I break things down in order to understand it, and that I always ask for evidence. Futuristic means that I look to the future with optimism as I could see a positive future. Input means that I collect things, mostly facts which are connected to my interests, and I crave to have more. Intellection means that I tend to focus on mental activity and that I tend to be introspective. Finally, restorative means that I like to solve problems and fix things. My analytical and intellection themes allowed me to come up with a list of thorough questions and gave me ideas for different ways to phrase things. My futuristic theme assisted me when things got difficult with the interviews by reminding myself that even when things were going well, I will eventually reach my overall goal, and I just needed to hang in and do what I can and try not to worry about things I can't do. Although I didn't reach this point until I had gone through 2 weeks of near constant panic attacks. My restorative theme allowed me to try to solve the issues which cropped up, and this got in the way when I was trying to find a compromise when there apparently wasn't one to begin with. These strengths helped me to better understand and connect my interview experience to the course material. I have found that there were a few things which were important and connected well to my experiences, specifically the point in Chapter 1 of the text where it highlights the fact that employers like to hire individuals with good communication skills. I felt that this tied into my interview experience since I felt that doing these interviews not just allowed me to hone my professional communication skills, but gave me the means to show off said skills that I have been working on throughout this course to potential employers. I have found that by reading about what goes into nonverbal communication in Chapter 3, when it came time to do the interviews, I was also monitoring my own nonverbal communication to try to seem more professional. Specifically, I kept checking on my own gestures, posture, and tried to gauge my own facial expression. The latter part is difficult as I find it to be challenging to do so without a mirror, and I tend to have a resting face which many have misinterpreted as sad. Also, I realized that by being aware of the concept of regulators and back-channel cues also helped as I was able to perceive such gestures and also provide those same gestures when I needed to. In terms of touch covered in Chapter 3, I was advised by my first interviewee that a handshake at the beginning and end is a good idea, and when I took the advice toward my second interview, it appeared to have a good result. This was a bit difficult for me as I generally am uncomfortable with physical contact. I found that I kept referring to Chapter 7 when I was creating my interview outline, and arranging my questions as this chapter went over the steps in preparing my interviews in regards to structuring the interview topics and the types of questions used in interviews, such as open, closed, and hypothetical questions, and the different ways questions could be sequenced. Chapter 7 also went over the 3 parts of the interview process, which was information which I thought was important in the early phases of my interview process as I was working on my interview outline. However, most of the connections between my interviewing experience and the course material that I found is mostly within Chapter 8, as it is a chapter which details information gathering and career search information interviews, which were the type of interviews I was conducting. Of particular note is the pages which outline the steps specific to information gathering interviews, which I also turned to often during the time when I was working on my interview outline. In conclusion, my interviewing experience has tied in with Strengths Quest as many of my themes have come into play in some manner. Some of my themes were beneficial, such as my intellectual and analytical themes, but I found that my restorative theme had not been very useful. In addition, I have seen how the other course material also has a connection to my interviewing experience. Finally, I feel that this was an important learning opportunity for me. Thank you for your time and attention.